Mhm.
Hi, welcome to my channel. My name is Lisa Allistway, and I create inspirational and informational videos you can use and apply to your life. Today's guest is Tammy Peterson. You may recognize her or know her as the wife of Dr. Jordan Peterson. But Tammy is also a mother, a grandmother, an artist, and an inspiration to many. Her story is unique, powerful, and full of life lessons. Welcome, Tammy.
Thank you very much, Lisa. It's good to be here.
Good to have you. So, those that may not know, Tammy was diagnosed with a terminal illness and given less than a year to live. But her doctors were wrong, and she miraculously recovered. Tammy, would you mind sharing a little bit about that situation and also your mindset as you went through it?
Sure, I'd be happy to. Talking about this has been very helpful to me. I think, it's been long enough now in the past that I can talk about it. And talking about things like this, if they're far enough away from when they happened and they don't trigger you feeling unstable, is a very good practice. So
Yes.
it's good to talk about it. Um, So I was first diagnosed with renal cell carcinoma, which they told me was not something that was going to kill me, that it grew 1 millimeter a year. And so they said, you don't have to rush into the hospital for surgery. You can take your time. And so we did. We were on a book tour and we went to Australia before we decided to come back and have my surgery. And the surgery was a partial nephrectomy and it went fine. 6 weeks later, I was strong and walking and healthy, I thought. But then when we went to the appointment with the surgeon, they had done a biopsy and verified that, in fact, it was a Bellini tumor. And a Bellini tumor usually will metastasize so quickly that it kills you without knowing that you have it. Because I really didn't have, I had a bit of a symptom when I was recovering from my partial nephrectomy. I had some flank pain
Hmm.
on my left side. And that is an indication that you have a Bellini tumor. It's very subtle, though. I just had,
Yeah.
it could have been a muscular pain. It didn't really feel like muscular pain, but I didn't know what it was. Anyway, that alerted them to the fact that there had been, in the first biopsy I had, there was some idea that there was a little indication that it might have been a Bellini tumor, but I guess that wasn't taken as for sure until they'd done the operation and done a second biopsy, but then they were sure. So at my 6 week appointment, I went in with my husband. We were all ready to hear the good news. And as it turned out, we didn't have any good news. And the surgeon was so shaken. He was shaking and he was, um, when you don't want to tell, I can't imagine what it's like to tell people and to see the disbelief and horror on their faces when they realize that they've been told that their their wife's life is over or their life is over.
Hmm.
And so we signed all the forms that we had to sign and we left. And I reflected right away and I thought, I've lived this life. I'm 57 years old. That's kind of young, but I do know I have had family members, aunts and uncles who've passed away young. I guess maybe I'm going to join them, and I made that decision that that was okay with me. And only a few minutes later, when we drove home and I told my son and his wife, I saw the pain on their faces and recognized the profundity of the situation, um, that I couldn't face on my own. I don't think. I don't think I could really, until I saw it on their faces. It wasn't, it didn't have the same impact as when I heard for myself.
Hmm.
Because I've always been a very independent person. I've always done well on my own with all my decisions. But I did have a tendency to keep things to myself, to keep my problems to myself,
Mm,
to, if I was having something that I had to work through, I would work through it and then I would tell people once I'd
mm,
worked through it. And I felt that that was a reasonable thing to do. But during this whole health crisis, I learned otherwise, that that isn't a reasonable way forward, that you need support and you need to open your heart to a higher power. You have to be open and humble
mm,
and go forward in that respect. And I hadn't realized that that's not what I was doing before.
mhm.
So it was almost a very, um, it was an insightful moment when I
Yeah.
told my son. Um, it really turned my perception around
Mhm.
in the moment. I all of a sudden realized this is not. I'm not seeing the world properly at all, and um, I always thought that I was in service. I was helping my husband. Um, I thought that I was making good choices, and I imagined that I was doing the best I could. There's no doubt about that. I was doing the best I could. But just at this moment, I had a new understanding that was more profound, that we aren't here at all for ourselves, that we are here to be of service to those people around us, and whatever we see has to be done. Now, there is also there is also ourselves, and we are one of those other people, you know? And
Yes.
and so we have to take that person who we are, the essence of us, the divine side of us, seriously too.
Mm,
But the other side of us, the ego side of us, that's the part of us that sometimes gets control when we're afraid or when we're angry, or when we have um, things that make us uncomfortable. Then if we're not in that divinity, in that side of divinity where we can let the the circumstances show themselves, so that we get a good understanding from every angle, we sometimes take control and try to force a direction and hope that, and believe that sometimes in our arrogance, that we have the answers.
mhm.
And at that moment, I realized I did not have the answers. I didn't have the answers, and I didn't know who did. The only person I figured out who did was the essence of humanity, which would be translated to God. So I was really all of a sudden putting all my faith. I was putting myself in God's hands at that point, and that was a new and profound realization for me. Even though my mother was raised in a fairly religious home. My grandmother was religious, but she had been raised as a Catholic, and she somehow, I don't know the story, changed us to Protestants.
Mm,
And so, um, there was some discontent somehow. I don't know exactly the story of that. And my grandmother on my father's side was Protestant, and she was a lovely, caring person. But there was and she played the piano in the church, uh, and she played the piano at my wedding, and she was always gently religious as far as I knew.
mhm,
And so I did get some guidance in that direction, and I went to Sunday school as a small child, but I left the church probably about when I was 13, when I started studying yoga. so
mm,
i so I had that spiritual practice,
mhm,
and I did practice every day until I was about 26, and then I started doing Kundalini yoga. And Kundalini yoga then is a much more spiritual practice. I did that every day until I was diagnosed, really. But
oh,
at that point, my Christianity seemed to be what uh, came up as the bedrock beneath me. And I
mhm,
think, that is what I began with in the beginning. And that is what is the heritage of my family, and the ancestry of my family is Christianity. And so when it really, when the rubber hit the road, I think that that's what I went back to I it was it was the most profound and the
Mm,
most. Um, it wasn't that I had studied it and understood it. Even it was just that I don't know. It was just there. It was
mhm,
just there. I can't really explain it. So then I went. I went on. I accepted any help that came my way. My sister-in-law was a nurse. She came to stay with us before I had my surgery. My sister is a nurse. She came to stay with me, and these people are on the other side of North America. They came, they
mm,
gave up their lives for a bit and came and took care of me for a week or two at a time. And my husband's mother came. She actually spent. She's retired. She spent quite a bit of time with us, and that was really lovely. So even though they were here for a really horrifying and harrowing time, the time that we spent together as families was so precious. It was
mhm,
something that I can remember fondly, really. And I do feel that what I've gone through was a gift, even though
mm.
it was and even though it may have killed me.
Yeah. When you
Uh,
say gift, do you mean because of the lessons you learned that you might not have
yes,
otherwise?
yes, absolutely, yeah. And I think my opinion is that God gives us lessons to learn from, and sometimes those lessons kill us. And
Mm,
so we have to be. It's hard to be that humble to accept that that is the outcome, but we have no control over outcomes. We only have control over ourselves and what we decide to pay attention to or not,
mhm,
and so I became more aware of that. And after I'd had my second surgery, and that seemed to go very well. They got the cancer. There was no chemotherapy or no radiation offered because the kind of cancer it is, they haven't found anything else that helps. It's such an aggressive cancer um, that you have to take it out, and then you hope for the best.
mm,
I did a 2 hour meditation the night before my surgery, and I looked at the cancer in my mind. I went down to my kidney and I asked it to show me what was going on, and I saw cells that were turned away from me.
mm,
Metaphorically, they were black. They were turned away like a black hole, I thought. And I felt like if something has turned away so much that it is a black hole, if it's no longer with you, then it is not, then I'm not enough to bring it back. I'm not enough to bring those cells back. So the best thing to do is to give them away. And so I gave them away to the universe. And I thought that would be the only place I could place them that wouldn't be destructive. And who knows what black holes are? I don't know. Um, anyway, that's what I did the night before, and that calmed us down. We had a good night's sleep. I went into surgery the next day. I told the surgeon what I'd done the night before to calm myself down. He said they used the same intention as they went through. They said everything came out with no trouble. But then a few weeks later, my limbs started to swell because they had taken out all my lymph because the
mm,
cancer had gone into the lymph gland. And they took all my lymph in my kidney. And when I was young, I remember you'd hear someone had cancer, and if they said, "Oh, it's in the lymph," oh, it's in the lymph, they're going to die. We used to just think of it as a death sentence as soon as it went into the lymph, but that's not the case anymore. There's interventional radiology is a field where there are brilliant uh, doctors who can look at the lymph system, and the lymph system is like a spider web inside you, and there's no pump, there's no heart. It just goes along beside the blood vessels, and as you move, the waste products that are put into the lymph to be recycled back through the body, they do so because you move. And when
mm,
people don't move, then you start to get swelling in the legs. That's all lymph. That's all lymph that's not being brought back to the heart, right? So I was having an accumulation of lymph in my feet and then in my legs. uh, my genitals swole up. That was something I'd never seen before and never thought would happen. But obviously, if your body is filling with fluids, it's going to fill every cell. And then my abdomen started to swell. And we called the hospital. We talked to them, but they said, you've had radical surgery and you may have some swelling. And so we thought, oh, okay, but seems kind of extreme. But on my 6 week checkup for that one, I went into the hospital and he sent me into emergency because I had an ascites, Achilles ascites, and that is when the lymph has a, so they tied up all the little loose ends of the lymph on that side. It looked like they were it looked like they were bobby pins when I saw them on the scan
Mm.
holding, but there are so many that they missed one. Probably it was a very small leak because they never could find it. So it must have been a teeny tiny little leak because no matter how many scans they did and in how many ways they scanned, they couldn't find the leak. I was in the hospital eventually. That they told me to go home and eat a non-fat diet because
Mhm.
sometimes if you eat a non-fat diet, your lymph will not be working, and then scar tissue will close up. And but that didn't work. I kept losing weight. A nurse was coming every day and taking a liter of fluid off me, which didn't even make me comfortable. I think I was losing about a gallon a day. So it was
Oh.
all my fluids, which meant that my mind was not very clear as well. And the right around Canada Day, July of 2019, I was with my son and his wife, and they were taking my blood pressure, and they couldn't get any blood pressure, and so they went out and they got another blood pressure cuff, and but I mean, they were just worried, but they didn't know what to do. My surgeon had been really good ever since the surgery. He saw me every week, and so I went in for my weekly, and he put me back in the hospital again. This time, my electrolytes had gone out of balance. I'd lost 30 or 40 pounds.
Wow.
Uh, I'd lost my cheeks. I'd lost any tissue that you would have that's not skeletal.
Your body
Uh,
fat.
I had lost it all. I lost
Mhm.
my bum, my breasts, my cheeks, everything, and I wasn't thinking very clearly. Anyway, my son and his wife helped me get to the hospital. My husband was out of town, and he went somewhere to a meeting, and he was all completely. He went to a meeting. I don't know how he did it with me feeling the way I was, but he found a very lovely family who said that if I had to go anywhere in the States for an intervention, that they would provide their private jet.
Wow.
Wasn't that ever nice? And so he came back from there, and I was in the hospital. I had been put in ICU because my electrolytes were out of balance and I was going to have a heart attack. So it was coming down to, you know, I wasn't going to last any longer, but they got me in the hospital. They put me on a heart monitor and they put fluids back in me. And then eventually they put nutrition in my heart. They put a they put um, a PICC line near your heart, and then they put nutrition straight into your heart. And so 3 days after that, I woke up and realized where I was and
Mm.
what had happened. I vaguely knew what was happening. It wasn't like I wasn't there, but I was, and I didn't even know that I was as out of it as I was. I just wasn't aware.
Mhm.
So then once I was aware, I felt much better. They put me in a private room, which I realized was not a good sign because when you've gotten into a private room, they don't know what to do with you anymore.
Mm.
If you're in a room with a bunch of people, they know you're in and out. It's a good place to be.
Yeah.
now I know that. Never complain about being, put in busy rooms anymore.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So I had a very nice room, and there was a beautiful 4-story atrium beside my room that I looked down into with lots of plants and places for people to go, places for staff to have their lunch, but places for patients to walk around and have a feeling of being out of doors if they weren't
Mhm.
well enough to go out of doors. Um, and so that's the first place I went. I eventually took my IV pool and my fluid bag out and walked around the blocks. I was trying to get my
Mhm.
strength back, and it was hot, hot summer, and I had on a wool hat and cashmere pants and my house coat, and I
Mhm.
slept at night with a wool hat, cashmere pants on, um, wool socks, a hot water bottle, and a big quilt that was put on top of me because I'd lost all my body fat. And when you lose all your body fat, I had no heat. left in my
Mhm.
body, and I
Right.
just froze. And that was the symptom that was so terrible, was I just was freezing all the time. So
Mhm.
you see pictures of me in the summer with my red wool hat on. Yeah, right until the end. Anyway, I was there, and a really lovely um, Catholic woman who we've known as an acquaintance. She came and brought me a rosary, and I prayed the rosary every day with her in this atrium. And she came at 10 o'clock in the morning, and we'd go down to the atrium, and I would sit for her with her for 2 hours. She gave 2 hours of every day. I prayed and told her my life story and cried,
Mm.
and that was good.
There's like
And
a
I learned,
release.
it really was. It was a therapy, it was really good. Confession every day really was what it was. It felt That's what it felt like. And after 5 weeks, they had scanned me like endlessly. They'd been giving me albumin because I had no protein in my blood. Like I was just having a terrible time. And then they started looking at interventional radiology, and they were suggesting that I have um, someone look at me and see if they could block the leak. And the fellow who was in at the Toronto Western Hospital was a great doctor. He was trained in Pennsylvania, and he suggested that we go down to Pennsylvania where they have MRI guided scan, and they don't have those kind of scans. They have CT scans, but an MRI guided scan, then they might be able to see the leak. And because we had this jet, and because we had
Mm.
some money, off we went. We went down there, and my husband went with me, my son and his daughter, and my sister-in-law, her two kids, and my mother-in-law.
Wow. The
Wow,
whole
hey,
family.
it was very nice. It was very nice, and they rented an Airbnb, and I went into the hospital, and they did the procedure, which was an amazing procedure. I could see it on the screen, but they couldn't find the leak.
Mm.
And before I had left to go to Pennsylvania, my friend Queenie is her name, the Catholic woman. She also was working. She's a member of U of T. She um, She lives in a Kintora College, and it's a women's uh, residents, but they have programming, and they have meals together every evening, and they have a chapel, and they have a priest. And
Oh,
that
wow.
priest came and blessed me the night before
Mm.
I went, and told me to pray on gratitude. And he gave me a Saint Jose Maria novena for the ill, and there are 9 days of prayer in there if you're very sick. And so I was praying those daily, and on the fifth day after the surgery, where they couldn't find the leak, my leak closed. And
Wow.
yeah, and they said that now and then, because they use poppy seed oil to bring the dye in to find the leak, because they look on the MRI and see a plume if they find the leak, um, the poppy seed sometimes is irritating to the lymph system.
Mm.
And if it's irritating, then maybe it'll irritate enough that the body will try to close the leak. And it did.
Wow.
So I think that's what happened. It was a miracle. Uh, I had told my husband probably in June, because I knew that I was going to live by then. I just didn't know how I was going to live. And they told me I might have a tube that would go from my belly to my heart, that I would
Mm.
live, but it would be a compromised life.
Mm.
But I told him that I would be well by August 19th, which was our 30th
Oh,
anniversary. And
amazing.
that was the day I was well.
Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah, it
Um,
was amazing.
I'm
Yeah.
really curious about, the original doctor telling you you had less than a year to live, and then these events and circumstances happened. What was your conversation with him like today?
Yes, that's a good question. He followed me so carefully. As I said, I had weekly meetings with him from the time he found out that I had this complication. And it wasn't that he was a surgeon. He wasn't going to help me with a lymph problem, but he had me come into his office every week and met with me, checked my blood pressure, and and sometimes put me in the hospital. So he was the front man, and he visited me always in the hospital. Sometimes he came and visited me after surgery at 10:30 at night. He'd come in his scrubs and say hello, and he was a remarkable person, that he cared so
Mm.
much.
Yeah.
Yeah, even though he couldn't do anything, he was so caring,
Yeah.
and it was beautiful to have that care. Um, I went back to, and the nurses on the ward too. I was there for 5 weeks. I really got to know them, and the care was great. And it was funny because there was this one male nurse, and he seemed very shy to come in my room, and I didn't know why. And he kind of had a look on his face that was, I don't know, I didn't know what it was. It seemed like disdain or something, and I didn't know what was going on. Anyway, as the nurses are exchanging and stuff, one day he had to come into my room, or he was, you know, found out he was a fan of my husband's, and he was too shy to come into my room. He was too shy. But he told me about some clothing that's very comfortable, that's um, sometimes one piece pieces of clothing that his wife wore when she was having babies, and he suggested that I get some of that. And
Mm.
they were just very, very sweet. I bought them all flowers and fruit and stuff when I left, and I came back to visit. But then COVID has happened, and you don't have any access to the hospitals. But once I do have access to the hospitals, I'd really like to go back and see them all, uh, and visit and share how well I'm doing, because you know they always wondered if I was going to get well or not, and
Yes.
because I did, I'd be happy to go back. And I've also thought of going, once the hospitals are open, going volunteering in some hospices, and so I'll look into that as the world comes back to normality.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Oh, very cool. Your story is definitely one of resilience. And I was wondering if we could maybe touch on this topic a little bit. How do you define resilience?
How do I define resilience? I think that giving up control gives you resilience. I believe that uh, I have to. I pray every morning. I meditate every morning. After I pray, I ask for God's will when I'm meditating, and then whatever comes my way during the day, I face as a challenge from God, as a challenge for me to be a better person and maybe be helpful to someone. So that that puts me in a position to see miracles. I see miracles
Mm.
during the day, because I'm not trying to be the person in control. I'm opening the door for miracles to happen, and it's a radical way to live, because I have to be so mindful all the time.
Hmm.
But I did spend many, many years doing yoga and meditating. And so I had practiced that. Oh, no, not to that extent. And I didn't understand it to that extent. But now I understand it better. And I think the resilience comes from accepting help, because we can't do these things on our own.
Yep.
Thinking that you can do things on your own means that you're going to, I mean, just even living on your own, eating on your own is a difficult thing. So, let alone when you're ill.
Hmm.
So it's a very, when it's better to go out and eat in the park with the squirrels and the birds than it is to eat alone in your house. You know,
Good point.
yeah, it is, because then you're sharing. You don't have to
Hmm.
give the animals any food, but just to be there and aware of them is, I don't know, it's something.
A
And to
connection to
be,
nature.
yeah, and to be aware of the trees that are shading you, and everything, to be aware like that gives you resilience, because then you're not alone. You're never alone. That's the thing. You are never, people don't have to be alone. And
Right.
it's a really, I think it's a real gift to find that out, that you never have to be alone. Um, but it takes it takes faith to it takes faith to admit that you can be humble and allow this um, essence of life to be with you all the time.
Mhm.
It's a very different way rather than, there's goal setting. You can set goals for the future,
Yeah.
but day to day, every 24 hours, one day at a time, you live with this essence and this intention uh, of spreading a word of service, and also doing service to yourself, and making sure that when you get up in the day, you attend to what might be most important and do those things that are important. And when I pray and I meditate, sometimes I can distill the wheat from the chaff. I can find out what I'm worried about, and maybe not able to change, and recognize those things I can do,
Hmm.
and do those instead.
And the
And
things you can't change, you can always ask for help, you know?
and you can always help. Yes, you can definitely ask for help for those things, because they're beyond you. So there's no
Yeah.
sense thinking that you're in control of those things.
Yes. Well, life is tough and we're all faced with adversity. It doesn't discriminate. And I think whenever we're hit with something traumatic, we might ask the question, why? Why me?
Hmm.
We might feel like so alone that this is only happening to me. And I think if you're going to really exercise your resilience muscle, you have to kind of remember, why not me? This is universal, this human experience and adversity and things that we go through.
When I was 13 and I started doing yoga, I thought, I'm going to need this when I'm old. That was what I thought. So I'm going to do it every day. I don't need it now. I'm a very healthy, active person. I don't feel I need it now, but the practice is what I don't know why I knew that. That was a gift to know that I needed spirituality, that this would be, I guess my grandmothers, they lived to be quite old. My grandmother on my dad's side died at 93. My grandmother died at 98. I think she was 98. And she was a very philosophical person. And so, whenever you met with her, although it was lovely and fun, it was spiritual always. So I think I must have inherited that from her, that awareness of spirituality and necessity of having a spiritual life.
Mhm.
And my aunt who introduced me to yoga, um, I was she passed away. Her husband had worked with in construction and had worked with asbestos, and she had
Mm.
washed his clothes, and both of them died from lung cancer from asbestos poisoning. Wow. Yeah. So
Mm.
whenever I see asbestos, I run.
Yes.
we should all run, but some of
Yes.
us are more susceptible to those
Mm.
problems than she was. But when she passed away, she gave my cousin a book of miracles when she, and so she knew to give to my cousin. She knew that, also she'd given us yoga. She gave her daughter the book of miracles. So she was handing over what her mother had taught her, and she handed it to me through yoga.
Oh.
And I really think that opened my eyes. And but because it's a custom that's from another country and
Mhm.
another religion,
Mhm.
although uh, I can really learn a lot. um, I can get something more profound from my own religion. I learned that.
That's good
Hmm.
that you got that foundation at a young age and it kind
Yeah.
of planted the seed so that when you really were hit with like basically death's door, you went back to your foundations. They came
Yes.
back to you.
Yes, they
Some of the
came back to me. I opened myself to them, and they were there.
two.
Yeah,
Mhm.
because they're always there. All we have to do is open ourselves to them. They're there. Yeah.
Yes. I have another question about resilience and relationships because like you mentioned, this isn't just about you, and you couldn't have gone through this just by yourself. And the people around you also had to practice a level of resilience. And so, can you speak a little bit on the importance of the resilience and building those resilient relationships?
It was quite magical actually, because I was really steeped in my faith by the time I was in the hospital, and going further. But mostly, I mean, it's still pretty profound. I still live this way. My dad still asks me if that's where I am, and I say yes, that's where I am. But my father and my husband's father, uh, who are thoughtful people but not religious people, they were praying. You know,
Mm,
my mother-in-law, she has always sung in the church. She has faith, but she was really praying. Everybody was praying. Every it really, it turned around into everyone praying. And now when one of our friends faces something, so we have some friends that are facing something, and they said they went into the hospital and they thought they saw me there, and they knew that I was there with them. And so I'm praying for them, and my sister-in-law, who's very good friends with them too, she's praying for them always. And we have a little chat group where we check in. And so this resilience, that in sharing and belonging, is translating. My sister, my dad is 90, and so he's becoming frail. And
mm,
my sister, she's a nurse. She lived in a big city and moved to the little city that he lives in. And so now she's close and she can take care of him. And then I have another sister. She's older, and unfortunately she's suffering from dementia, the same thing that my mother died from. And
mm.
she's only 67 and she needs care.
Wow.
And so my other sister is doing both of those, and she's talking to me all the time about how to do this and not get swallowed by it, not be responsible for them,
Yeah.
but to lend a hand wherever she can.
Hmm.
And that, I'm so grateful that I have learned what I've learned so that I can pass it on to the people I know, my sister-in-law too, and to help her with her marriage and her teenage kids that are growing up and stuff, knowing that um, we have our faith, we have our understanding, but to leave people to their lives, because if you try to control other people, they don't have a chance to grow and become strong and courageous. Because if you are too much in their lives, they don't get to learn these lessons. They don't get to bump into life like you
Right.
have to in order to be a more mature person. And
Right.
so you can do that with your children, but you can do it with your spouse.
Mm.
You can be too helpful,
Yeah.
and all of these things are kind, but if you all of a sudden get sick, where does that leave them? they don't
Right.
they don't know where anything is. And it's stressful enough to be with someone who's ill, but to also feel like you're not adequate because you've been put in a situation where you can't take take up the reins.
Hmm.
That's not good. So we do have to give each other, for resiliency, you have to let people uh, go. You have to let them run into life, even though uh, it can really be, um, they can get to death's door. But all you can do is be of service to them, and to do what you can that's in your domain, and let them find their way with
Yes.
whatever resources they will find. And
Yes.
I think that's what builds resilience.
Absolutely. I always think about, you want to have a sense of control and you want to be in the driver's seat, and you don't want to take that away from somebody because it's their experience to have that. And
Exactly.
yeah, I think
Mhm.
that's key. I think another key thing about resilience, which you touched on, was being able to focus your attention, especially during those difficult times. And one of the things you had mentioned, you do gratitude exercises every day, and that's, I think, a key thing, because we can go down negative road that could be our default very easily if we're not careful. And we have to like have bring that attention back to, well, what's good now, you know?
Absolutely. In my rosary prayers, every day there's a certain intention, and then I will think about, okay, who do I want to pray for? So do I want to pray for the doctors of the world? Do I want to pray for the ill people in the world, the governments, the elderly, the young families? So I have different, and usually sometimes I'll think of my family. I'll think maybe of my son and his wife and his little kid. Then I'll pray for all. I'll pray for all young families. I think of my father. I pray for all elderly people, and so I, that's really helpful to get you into gratitude. But
Mhm.
I also have found that if I'm stuck, so I have someone who I've been communicating with, and we come to something that causes some discontent, and then we're stuck in a place where maybe there's anger uh, or hurtful feelings happening. Then I write a gratitude list for that person. First of all, I tell my higher power I'm willing, I want to give whatever it is I'm feeling up. But if I write a gratitude list for them, then I can see them as a whole person and not just this very narrow window that I'm seeing them as what is hurting me about that person.
Yeah.
But if I can, then I can make it bigger and more robust because I'm thinking of them in their entirety. By maybe I can list all their positive uh, personalities. I can list all the positive personality attributes for this
Mhm.
person, or which is really helpful. I find that was, my mom is passed away, and my father is very elderly, but I thought, they've always been my mom and dad. But if I can, so I wrote a list of the positive personality attributes of both my mom and my dad, and it broadened my uh, gratitude and it broadened my love for them because
Mhm.
they were enriched by being recognized for more completely who they are. And
Mhm.
so that is a super practice. I find it, if you're resentful about someone and you write a gratitude list for them, the resentment will be,
Mhm.
diminished and hopefully dissipate if you focus on that gratitude and of that other person. I think you can completely let it go.
That's really good. That's a
Yes.
very, very good tip.
Yes.
So we're talking like about resilience at the individual level, and then there's an impact of building resilience in your family unit, but also in your community. What would you give as far as maybe ways that we could build a more resilient community?
Well, okay, that's a good question. I haven't been asked that one before. So it's very similar to your family. So um, if you're giving service to your family, uh, answering, whatever it is that comes up, if you can do it, then you do it. The same thing can happen in your community. You can be there for service to your community, and you can recognize that if something is needed, let's say there's garbage on the street or in the park, or that's something simple, you can pick it up. That's service. It's a good
Mhm.
service.
Mhm.
If somebody is walking down the street and they have way too many packages, you can ask if you can help carry their packages. They don't, they and uh, even if they don't want you to, they'll really be pretty pleased that you asked them. So it's a really good gesture. So even if you can't do service, if you can actually, if you can't do service for other people, you can do service for your surroundings. And you can start with surroundings if you're shy. So if you're shy, then you can do things like uh, rake leaves or pick up garbage or tidy the playground, put all the little toys in a row or something. But you can do those sorts of things, and those things will bring you community. If you do
Mhm.
those things, it'll bring you community because people will notice. They'll notice that you're doing something that's kind and generous and thoughtful,
Mhm.
and that takes away fear. And so, if people are afraid to reach out, then there's going to be more reaching out when you start to engage in your community. Now, once you are somebody who's um, once you're somebody who's engaged with their community, then the idea is to decide what it is you want to do and say yes to it and do it, whether you're afraid or not. And leave it up to God, because it'll work out how it's supposed to work out if you aren't trying to take too much control.
Mhm. And through that service, you can always help somebody learn something new that maybe they can pass on and help somebody else. It can have like a,
Right.
a ripple effect.
Right. That's right. And children will watch you, and so yeah, because if children see other people tidying up, they'll tidy up too. They want to know what to do in the world, and the only way they know is with imitation. When they're quite young, they look to see what other people are doing, and then they do that too, and that's
Right.
what they learn.
Right.
Yes. Hmm.
Yes, we're definitely a role model to children, especially how we role model resilience. So
Yes.
behooves us to learn some of these skills and have them in our toolbox, so that when those hard times come, we can have a more positive outcome with our reactions.
Yes. Absolutely. So yeah, we don't want to put ourselves in a place where we feel that we've become isolated,
Hmm.
and we have um, no way to be a useful person in society. That's not a something that will uh, increase your immune system and give you resiliency to. And we have to also get outside, right? We've learned this with what we've gone through with the pandemic this time, is
Hmm.
that if you stay inside, the air quality inside isn't what the air quality is outside. It's best to be outside. So whenever people are feeling like they're isolated, it's best to go outside and say hello,
Yes.
and say
Yes.
hello. Right?
Yes.
It's so funny because I grew up in a little town in Western Canada where everybody said hello. Everybody,
Hmm. Hmm.
and then I moved to the big city where nobody said hello. But I've always, when I've been in good shape, I've always said hello.
Hmm.
And some people will, or I smile at them. I don't always say hello, but I smile. And some
Mm.
people look at you like, they kind of like, who are you doing? But other people smile back, and I think, oh, Yeah. And I really like
Yes.
that. That's really fun. Just to smile at people is a
I
fun
grew
game.
up in
It's
a
a
small town.
game.
And
Yeah.
yeah, I grew up in a small town, and when you drive, you got to wave. Every
Yes. Yeah.
car you pass, you're waving.
Yeah. Yeah. That's right. That's right. And
um,
it's good. Hmm.
yes, yes. So I have just a couple fun questions if you're game for it.
Sure.
Okay, so what's your guilty pleasure?
What's my guilty pleasure? Hmm. Let's see. You know, the things I like to do, I don't know if they're guilty.
You
I really like to swim. I really like to go to the cottage. I guess that's a guilty pleasure because
like to go to what?
the cottage. I like to go up to the cottage and be at the lake and just forget all my responsibilities and just go up there and do whatever I want and swim like 6 times a day and just be with the sun and nature. And that, I I I I probably fantasize about being up there for all the time. I mean, when
Hmm.
I first moved into this city, I can remember it was 20, what's this? This is 2021. So it was 21 years ago when we moved here, and we bought this little house that needed to be renovated. And I thought, can I live here? It's a big city, and we live in a semi-detached house, and you're looking at the neighbors there and the neighbors there and the neighbors there and neighbors there. And
Hmm.
I sat at my back window and I said, can I live here? And I thought, if I can go out of the city on Sundays, I can live here. And so it's always been for me that I need to be out of town. When I
Hmm.
first I moved to Montreal when I was really young, and I used to walk on Mount Royal. And I imagined the sound of traffic was the sound of waterfalls. And I would just walk up there and imagine that I was away from everything. And that gave me a lot of peace of mind. And so I think my guilty pleasures are getting away from everything and
Yes.
finding my peace. And it feels a little greedy when I do that, but I really love it.
Yeah, I can
Yeah.
relate because I live in Houston. It's loud, it's crowded, traffic. But I grew up in a small town, so anytime I can get out of the city, I feel more at peace.
Yes. Yeah.
Mhm.
And there's parks and stuff around here, but there's just something about getting out of town. Well, to see the night sky. I grew up with the night sky, and that's how I bought this cottage. I found a cottage, a teeny little cottage, among other cottages. There were 23 little cottages. They were first built in 1920. There was a lodge built, and then there were 23 tents. And then over time, they put platforms under the tents. And then they built a little one-room bunkie on each platform. And then eventually they put bedrooms, one or two or three bedrooms on it, and a little kitchenette in it and bathrooms on it. But at the beginning, everybody ate in the lodge together. And so I bought one of these little cottages,
Nice.
and it was so nice. We went up. I took my husband up there, and I said, "Look, come outside." It was about 9:30 at night, and we go outside, and we're standing a foot apart, and we can't see each other. And I said, "Remember this," because he and I are from the same little town, where it was so dark at night, especially in the winter, but so dark at night that you couldn't see your hands to touch anything. And we had been in the city for so many years, because by then our kids were in 2000. So we'd been 89, we were born. So it had been 11 years we'd been married at that point. And we'd spent most of our time in the city, although we'd gone to visit his family at the lake. Our life was really in the city. And I brought him out there, and I took him out, and it was quiet and it was dark. And I said, "Remember this," and looked up at the sky. I said, "Remember this, I want this." And so then we
Mm,
bought a cottage. Oh, that was
nice,
so good. Yeah.
nice, nice.
Yes.
So I mentioned in the intro you're an artist,
Uh-huh.
and so what brings your inspiration to your art?
Well, that's an interesting question. It's changed over the years. I think that my emotional angst would inspire me. It has inspired me.
Did you do a
And
lot of art when you were going through the health issues?
um, what did I do? Let's see. No, I don't think so. I played cards.
Okay.
I played cards. I prayed.
Okay.
Uh, no, I don't think so. But as soon as I was better,
Hmm.
then I did daily yoga practice. I had a Zoom meeting online, so that was good. It was with other people. And I began to, I organized, I was renovating my house when I was really sick.
Mm.
And luckily, the people that we hired to renovate the house were really good people. And so they finished the project when we were out. Otherwise, we were gone. So thank goodness for that, because it would have been, I wouldn't have had anything to move back into. But I had organized a place in the basement with a nice big, um, um, let's see, it was a desk, whoops, in a small room, but I cut a hole in the wall so that I had natural light coming in, and I put really good lights up above, and I had all my art supplies there. And so this is we live in a little house. And so there's never really been a place for me to do this. Sometimes I would do art on the porch. Sometimes I'd do it in the backyard, but there just wasn't anywhere for me to just put all my stuff and leave it there,
Hmm.
you know? And so this was going to be that place. Also in the basement, I have an infrared sauna,
Oh, those are great.
and yes, those are great. And I had a massage table for years because I was a massage therapist. I
Mm.
don't have that table anymore. I have a cold laser. I do laser therapy for people, for bioflex laser that helps people with broken bones and twisted ankles and
Oh,
chronic
wow.
pains of arthritis and stuff. So it's a great it's a great device, and it costs about the same as a massage, so it's a good option for people. So I put that into my practice. I still have the laser here, and I had done a goal setting activity. I think it was was it my husband's? Yeah, it was my husband's goal setting, selfauthoring.com, where I had written down my future in 5 years. And I had thought what I would like to have is a spa. I'd like to have a place where there was a lane pool and a juice bar and massage rooms and a yoga studio. And like, that's who I am, that's who I am. And it would be in the country, surrounded by, and it would have and the parking lot wouldn't be paved, it was,
Mhm. Yeah, the
that was
night
my,
sky every
that,
night.
that was my vision. But
Yeah.
really, when I go down into my basement, I have an infrared sauna. I have a massage room. I have a place to do yoga on the third floor because we have an open place there. I have that place here. I built that place in my home. And it was funny because I had this ideal place that I had imagined.
Mhm.
But once 20 years had gone by and I looked to see if I had what I'd asked for, I had everything. The only thing I didn't have was art. Art was the other
Mm.
goal and I had never fulfilled it. So when I renovated my house, I made this place to have art. And that was good. And then it was COVID. So I was going online and taking art classes on Zoom. And that was good. And I did well at all of that. But then, you want to do the art on your own. And I walked by my office one day and I had been practicing being aware of all of my thoughts. And I walked by my desk and I heard my mind say no. And I thought, oh, isn't that interesting? I'm not letting myself sit down and do my work. Wonder what that is. So I went to my husband and I said what I had learned. And he said, well, that was really interesting. And so we made a plan that he would say in the morning, are you going to do something important? And I would say yes. And that would mean it was my art that I was going to go do. I said I wanted him to be supportive. I didn't want him to tell me what to do and to
Mhm.
ask me if I was going to do a project because it's what I want to do. And I really don't like anybody else to be involved. I want it to just be me.
Mhm.
And that's, I think, some kind of an artist's personality is somebody who is it's a soul activity,
It
in a
it makes
way.
sense because it's a creative process. You don't want
Yes.
influence from other people because then it's not your creative process.
Yeah, that's right. And so I said, if you just say, are you going to do something important? That's good enough. I get the cue from that. But from that day forward, I haven't had any trouble sitting down to it. All I had to do was become aware of the negative uh, um, self talk that I was having, share it with someone I trusted, to hear it in a good spirit, and then to discuss maybe maybe
Oops,
what. Oh, I'm
you went
sorry.
black.
This camera sometimes goes off. There it
Worries.
is. It's back
Okay.
again. Um, so to oh, now I can't remember what I was talking about, but it was
You were going
uh,
to share it,
oh, I
not
was
not
gonna.
not
Oh,
question
yes.
yourself about it and then
Oh,
share it.
right. Yeah. So so I got my husband to say that so that I would go down into my room now. I could sit down at my desk and draw. I didn't have any. There wasn't any negative self talk. Once I had shared it with someone. Yeah, that was it.
Mm.
Once I had shared it with someone, and um, admitted that, and I look back into my life, like, why would I be saying no? And I look back, my parents they didn't go to university. They were self made. My dad was in insurance and he made $1 million. He was a good businessman. And my mom was a bookkeeper and she went to work every day. But they were very practical people. And art wasn't something that they
Mm.
saw as a reasonable choice of life. And no wonder, because they always wanted us to be independent people and to have a bank account so that we were taken care of. And so I never really shared with them. It was difficult for me to share with them my passion for the creative life. And I'm a pretty open person. I mean, I thought being a bus driver would be good, but I also thought being a doctor would be good. So I was open to everything. And when you're open to everything, it's really hard to decide on one thing. That's
Mm.
why goal setting is good, because it helps you decide on one thing. But art has been something that I've done my whole life. I was always really happy creating. And
Mhm.
and so I knew when I was doing my goal setting. And when I went to university, I ended up getting a kinesiology degree, but art was part of what I was interested in. I was interested in science, in teaching, in medicine, in art. And so I learned all of the anatomy when I
Mhm.
went, so and I like to draw people. So it really did help my art, but there was something about me that I had taken from my parents' point of view and not updated it to a mature point of view. I had still
Mhm.
been, I still had their um, I won't say judgment, but their point of view was still informing me when it shouldn't be informing me anymore.
Mhm. So,
I'm grateful for everything they gave me, but I can make my own decisions, and I can make my own decisions on how I'm going to spend my time.
mhm.
And so now I can do that.
So what are you painting these days? Like, what are your favorite things to paint?
Well, for years and years, all I did was charcoal drawings. I did charcoal drawings of people mostly, but even if I was doing uh, I did a little bit of painting. One summer I took a painting course when I was pregnant with my daughter, and it was spring and all the leaves were coming out. And for 10 years after that, I was nauseous in the spring because I'd just been staring at the landscape. So
Yeah.
funny. That was so funny. Anyway, so I did like to do landscapes, but I found painting very challenging. And also I was kind of allergic to the oil paint. So I
Mhm.
stopped using oil paint. Then I thought maybe I could use acrylic. I'd never tried watercolors. So that's what I'm doing now is
Mhm.
I'm investigating watercolors. And I really, really like what I've learned because it's very open-ended watercolors. You splash, you wet the paper, splash color on it, and then see what's there.
Mm.
That's really good because often what I take is I'll take what I see and I'll put it on paper, or I'll take a person and I'll draw them on paper. But this is you're splashing this color and then you're seeing, okay, what is that? Uh, oh, well, maybe that's a stream. Oh, maybe this is where trees are. So then once it dries, you can paint in a few trees. And well, maybe there's a building back there. So then you can do a kind of a wash and make and leave where the building is. And so you can just make it out of your imagination. And
Oh, very cool.
that's I like that. I'm ready for that. And I can see why people often when they're older do watercolors, because maybe they're just more at home with who they are, and then
Mhm.
they can play like that.
Mm.
It's very playful.
Very cool.
And yeah, so that's what I'm doing.
So I have one more question.
All right.
I'd like to get your perspective on kind of this crazy journey you've been on with your husband, your daughter, and just kind of this being so publicly out there. Um, what
Mm.
what has been your perspective or experience about it all?
Well, I think it's been a long process, so I've gone through a lot of different feelings and thoughts about it. When it was really dire, and I was at home and I was feeling better, and my husband was away and not feeling well at all, and we didn't know whether he was going to live. I had some resentful feelings because, first of all, I was left all alone. I wasn't all alone. My son was in the neighborhood, but my husband was gone, and my daughter and her husband were with him, and I didn't know what happening day to day. It was very hard to actually be in touch with what was going on, and I was afraid. Right, I was afraid, and that fear made me doubt that the decisions we'd made for his healthcare were good or not. It made me doubt.
Mhm.
I was fearful, and I had to really work on. I was resentful at my daughter. I think it was easier for me to be resentful at my daughter for going with him and taking him away than it was for me to face the painful discomfort of not knowing what was going to happen.
Mm.
People will do things like that. They will, when they're afraid, instead of sitting with the discomfort of the fear and just looking to their higher power for comfort, uh, this idea of needing control will sometimes morph into anger towards someone, and a lashing out, and trying to find some relief that way. And I didn't want to find relief that way, so I wrote a gratitude list for her. And over about 2 weeks of I was out of town, near the ocean, walking every day, meditating on how I wanted to give this up to God. And eventually it did go away. But I think it was this gratitude list I told you about earlier that helped that. So once I was through that helped tremendously. Then I could be more mm, grateful, and also more caring, and more in a spirit of service to whatever I could do. So supporting other family members, really, because
Mm-hmm.
in their resentment, because everybody was feeling this real discomfort. And so by the time he came home, and he was still in uh, a lot of discomfort when he came home. Oh, but it was set up really good, because he didn't come home and live with me right away. He lived in a house that was a short drive away. So I could go every day and walk with him, and he could be with a nurse and some caretakers over at the other house. So he was safe. He was safe, but he was suffering so that, uh, and because I'd been through so much, my family didn't want me to, they wanted me to keep my resilience up, and they thought that it would be too much for me. And I think it would have been too much for me. I mean, I might have done all right, but I'm not sure I would have done all right. So
Mm-hmm.
I'm quite grateful to them that they set that up. And that was my daughter and her husband, well, who also set that up and found people to take care of him. And that way I could go every morning and have a walk with him, and I could go in the evening and watch some TV with him, but I could come home and rest every
Mm-hmm.
night. And
Mm-hmm.
so we did that for a couple of months until he finally moved home. And
Yeah.
now he's been home, and I think that my spiritual life has been sustaining for him. I am pretty insistent that that's where I am. I don't budge. I'm not giving it up. That is who I am, and I think that. And I've probably in the past, I was someone who would help him for my own benefit, and maybe take some of his um, independence away from him. Like, when wives sometimes do that. I don't do that anymore at all. And that takes rid that gets rid of any resentment you ever might have, because resentment often comes from expectations, right? So if you
Yeah.
have expectations of other people, so if you find yourself feeling like you have an expectation, so for instance, people send him books all the time, so we have so many books, and also they're all the different translations, they send us all those books too, and they don't
Oh,
send us one copy. They send us like 6 copies of a book in Polish.
wow.
I can't speak Polish, but anyway, so, but, and I've been trying to find places for all these books and everything. The other
Yeah.
day I stopped doing that. I'm just piling the books up now. I'm piling the boxes actually up.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not doing anything with those boxes, because I was finding that I was starting to resent the fact that they were coming. Well, I'm not going to do that. And if I don't want to do that, then I have to take my hands off them, and just leave them there. They're not my response. It's not my business.
Yeah.
Just leave it there.
Yeah.
And that's really that. So I try to keep myself really on my own side of the road, and do what I can to be of service,
Mm-hmm.
and answer all of his questions as best I can, but
Mm-hmm.
not give any advice. And that seems to work pretty well.
Oh, very good. Well, thank you so much, Tammy. I really do appreciate you coming on my channel and being willing to share. I mean, I know you've probably told this story a lot, but I think if it helps one person out there today that maybe gets some horrible news and, you know, you want to find out how to maybe get through it, Tammy's story and lessons are a definite thing to kind of listen to.
Absolutely. You know, when I was really, really, really ill, I asked God if He let me live, I would share. And so that's why I'm here. So
Thank
thank you
you.
very
Thank you.
much.
And thank God
Thank
for
God.
being
That's right.
here. Yes.
That's right.
Yes. And if you guys like this video, please leave a comment below and hit the like button. And don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell to be alerted when the next video drops. Thank you again, Tammy.
Thanks for your work. Bye bye.
Bye.
Bye bye.